You've mentioned a couple of times the therapeutic component to this, how healing it is. I would imagine you're probably witnessing people going through pretty profound experiences if they're out in nature for maybe the longest time they've ever been off the grid
Oh man.
and they're going on a hunt like this maybe for the first time.
Hmm.
I would imagine that sets the stage for a lot of probably really significant psychological developments for people too, whether they're having big, very on the surface healing experiences or very deep healing experiences. I would imagine there's a lot that you get to see and a lot that people wouldn't necessarily think about when they think, oh, I'm going to sign up for a hunt because it sounds like fun to go on a big hike and harvest some animals. That sounds great. But there's probably, I would imagine, sometimes the almost therapeutic elements of this are maybe the most profound and significant part of it for some people
Oh yeah.
coming out here. Can you talk about this a little bit? I would imagine it's a really big part of the experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Hannah. That's one of my favorite transitions to watching a person, and honestly, I feel it every time I go out. I'm excited for the next couple of days to go up there. It's remarkable how once you get a couple of days to disconnect in a very remote setting or just in nature in general, your sense of smell gets better, your thoughts are clearer, you're more focused, your stress levels and anxiety are just very minimum. Like it's nature's healing, and to watch somebody else that's maybe a CEO of a billion-dollar company that handles everything himself and is stressed to the max, and to maybe I've only got him for 10 days out there, and to watch him go through the different stages. By day 6, he is just cool as a cucumber, just, really appreciating the sunsets or really appreciating the rain on his face. Like, it's one of my favorite things to watch, honestly, because it is a tranquil thing being out in nature. You no longer have 25 different sounds hitting you from every angle. You have, oh, the sound of that stream, or, oh, the sound of the wind coming through the canyon, or maybe a couple of birds chirping. It takes everything back to the basics, and I've ultimately found, even within myself, but some of these other businessmen that come through, they go back and I talk to them a month later and they're like, oh, I was able to close that deal I was struggling on, or I was able to open up a new branch of this, or I was a better father, or, I just being able to just click off the societal brain and click on the primal brain, and it's recenters somebody. Almost like, you said you've traveled a lot. Like I said, it's almost like going to like Vietnam for the first time. You're not thinking about anything going on back home. You're so stimulated with all this awesome culture that you're not even stressing, and ultimately gives the brain a rest to come back and circle back about whatever you're stressing about and be like, oh yeah, that's silly. That's the answer to that. Or I can do that. So it is a very healing place, and it's extraordinary to watch it in people when they're coming out for the first time or even the 100th time. It always happens.
One of the most profound experiences of my early years of building my career and working in the startup world, which is what I did before I branched off to start my own business. I remember I was super stressed out about my job. I was working for this high growth startup, and it was, everything was held together by string and tape, and I was on calls all the, like, my job was just like being on call, basically doing customer service stuff 24/7. And it was exhausting. Like, I wasn't working all the time, but I always had my phone on me just in case I would get an email or a message from somebody who had a problem and I needed to deal with it. And so I was always on, and I just hadn't learned yet how to shut off the work I was doing and be like, it's okay. It'll all be here tomorrow. Nothing that will ruin my life is going to break. Like, it's okay. And I remember I went camping with some friends, and I was in a wilderness area where up in Colorado, and I had no cell service. And it was only 48 hours. It wasn't very long.
Yeah.
But I remember the feeling of just confusion when I realized I didn't have cell service, because I didn't know I wasn't going to have any service at all. And feeling like, well, hope nothing breaks.
Yeah.
And 24 hours in, I remember just this deep sense of peace that I felt. And it wasn't It was partly profound because it was in contrast to the absence of it, which I had been feeling for so long and hadn't really realized.
Mm-hmm.
And just this feeling, I remember laying on my back and just looking up at the stars, and I didn't want to go to bed because I just wanted to stare at the stars. They were so beautiful. And I remember just thinking, this is always here. None of these other things that I'm worried about actually matter because I can always come back here, and here is great. And I'm so at peace here.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I came back to that many times after I'd been on that trip and I was back to work. It was, and that's nothing compared to the experiences that you're talking about, but it was such a pivotal moment for me because I hadn't realized how stressed I'd gotten.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how caught up in all of the things I was until I was able to disconnect from it and have nothing for a weekend. Absolutely. And then everything felt so much chiller after that. So I would imagine if people are going from the highest stakes environments you're talking about to being off the grid for a week or 2 weeks at a time, I can only imagine the magnitude of that.
Absolutely. Well, you felt it. It's hard to even scale and compare the magnitude because whether it's 2 days or 20 days, you're still feeling that same disconnect and reconnect with nature and leaving everything else that we have been learned to think and do and know and so on and so forth. But ultimately, this was from the dawn of time. Nature has been that outlet for people, whether they're living in nature, whether they're using nature, or whether they're just using it to escape, like, what both of us do. It's a medicine. And that is it really excites me hearing that story and hearing that you've got to taste that a little bit and continue and run back to it, as a place of solitude and healing, to be like, all right, well, I'm going to turn the button off for a little bit and I'm going to go out here and bring my stress levels back down and cortisol levels back down. And that's what it's there for. It really excites me to hear that, you went through that process of, oh my gosh, okay, what am I going to do? My phone, it's not working. And then like 12, 18 hours in, you're like,
what phone?
Yeah. This is great. Look at these mountains, So that's awesome. You felt it, and that's something I really want to bring back to people. We've forgotten a lot about it, and even on a small scale, if we haven't forgotten about it, we don't know how to go about doing that, whether it is in the hunting realm or in the backpacking realm or in the meditation realm or foraging, however you want to tap into nature. It's readily available to everybody, and I listened to one of your podcasts as I was driving across, and it really impacted me when you were talking about spending 15,000 hours in a school and being disconnected from a lot of things, but nature being one of them, and then getting 1 hour of recess a day. And it's like, it should be the opposite. How focused would kids be if they could get outside and express themselves and tap into nature and ultimately learn so much about themselves, and then come in and focus on, okay, here, we're going to learn a little bit about this. And they'd be zoned in, I feel like, they would be able to, adhere and pay more attention to that. I don't know, that resonated tremendously with me as I was driving across listening to that. I was like, man, maybe we're doing this backwards.